It was June of 2009 when Tim Pauletti announced he wasn't going to seek a third term. And as those of you that have been involved for a long time know, there were some really good people in our party who had been preparing to run for the governor's office for a long time. I was not one of them. But I got encouragement from some different places that got Jackie and I to thinking about it. And after a few weeks, I told the story that some of you may have heard back then. How it was the 4th of July weekend of 2009. It was a Sunday afternoon, early evening, and Jackie looks at me and literally says, well, maybe you should run. What's the worst that can happen? You remember this story? She said, what's the worst that can happen? You know, you go out there, you definitely will raise the intensity of the discussion. Maybe you get people to talk about things that they might not have been comfortable talking about. And then after running for a few weeks, maybe you fall flat on your face and we get back to raising our family and running the business. That's the way it started. Here's the part I didn't tell you. I didn't tell you that at age 48, when we made this decision and I started doing it, I was out there on the road thinking to myself on a regular basis, how did I get here? I am not worthy of this. I'm running for the governor's office of the state of Minnesota. I didn't see my life going in this direction. I had great experiences during this time, these first few weeks. I tell one of my son Bobby, who was then 15 years old, it's the first weekend in August of 2009, and we're going to make this trek where we're going to travel north to the northwest corner of the state. We're going to travel across northern Minnesota. We're going to get to the eastern side and come back down. A little over 800 miles in a little less than 2 full days. And it's a Saturday morning. My son Bobby, then 15, is driving the car, and I got the delegate list and the cell phone, and we're rolling down the ramp onto 94 where Monticello is. If you're familiar with it, that area of 94 is literally a NASCAR track, right? As we're rolling down the ramp at about 8 a.m. and I got all this stuff together, it just suddenly hit me. I turned to my son Bob and I said, hey Bobby, have you ever driven on the freeway before? Big, huge smile as he turns to me and goes, once! I mean, it was wonderful, you know, as a family doing this stuff and getting to know you and having you get to know us. We were growing as a family. We were growing in terms of as citizens, as how do we participate in the freedom that we all enjoy in this country. And Jackie and I were growing as a couple. It was wonderful. And by the end of September, early October, maybe November of 2009, that I am not worthy turned into, you know what? I am very confident. In fact, I'm more than confident to do this job. My life, I think, has prepared me to do this job. And you gave us the honor of the endorsement in April, and we set off on a new journey. And I'll tell you what, the first part of the journey with you, and I will call anybody out who comes in and says, I'm responsible for winning the Minnesota Senate, or I'm responsible for winning this or that. One person does not win anything. It is a group of people together that achieve great things, and that's what we did. You'll remember as we came out and got to know each other, we all built this grassroots network. That's what moved the endorsement. But what I found out after the endorsement is that work had only just begun. Because there was another grassroots network that needed to be built. And it's a grassroots network with all the business owners in the state of Minnesota. Guess what? They're not all Republicans. Okay? But they do make a difference in whether you can be successful or not, because that's the money that drives campaigns. We spent the next several months out there, I mean, groups, Tony Sutton will tell you, we were meeting 3-4 times a week with groups of anywhere from 6 to 10 to 20 business owners in this state for one-on-one meetings so they could get to learn who we were, what we were about, and why it is you need to support Republicans in this election. Folks, I raised almost $3 million for my campaign, our campaign for governor, on an average contribution of less than $1,000. That's amazing. What Tony will confirm for you is that with Tony Sutton, doing it as a team, we raised every bit of that and more for all Republican candidates in this state. Guess what? By October, and I better back up just a little bit, that summer, as we were going through this process and we were continuing to build, yeah, there were days where I was out there going, am I really supposed to be doing this? I mean, when you're getting your tail kicked and they're telling you to keep your chin up, right? And you're seeing polling numbers that you got to come back from way back. You got to overcome odds that nobody else would have guessed. And guess what? By the beginning of September, it changed. You could feel it. Those business owners that had held back, they all started coming fast. I mean, it was palpable. The wind just picked up and the campaign was off and running like nobody could have 10 to 15-point difference became a dead heat by the beginning of October. And again, you could feel, and my attitude had gone from I'm not just confident, but you know what, Lord? You have prepared me through everything you put me through in my life to do this job. I was absolutely convinced that we were going to win. No question in my mind. It was going to be close, but we'd be 10,000, 20,000 to the good. I'll give you an example. That night before the general election, we're traveling this whole state. We got the 24-hour tour in the RV. We're just come out of Duluth, and we're traveling across northern Minnesota on Highway 2. We explode, and forgive me for you animal rights folks, we explode a deer on Highway 2. I mean, the lights on the RV are gone. Pieces are hanging off, hair is hanging off the side. Yeah, I know. I could get more graphic, but it's not. I mean, it was something because the kids were coming out of the RV and Jackie was out there going, you can take a peek, but then get back in the RV. And they're like, oh, wow, look at that. But we drive that. The rest of the night, we got to follow trucks because we don't have lights anymore on the front of the RV, and they're leading us in the dark. And we're in the downtown Virginia. Just think about this. 10 o'clock, 10:30, the night before the general election, downtown Virginia. It is standing room only, 150 people plus in this downtown business, in the heart of the Iron Range, in the heart of DFL country. And it was one of those evangelical experiences. You could feel the electricity. You know, I started off by saying, we got the Democrats on the run all across the state, folks. You know how I know? Because they're hiding in the ditches throwing deer at us as we're driving by. They're trying to slow us down any way they can, and it's not going to work. And you know what? When I got done talking in Virginia, I had miners coming up from the back of the room, shaking my hand and saying, you know what? I'm a Democrat. I voted Democrat my entire life. Tomorrow, I'm voting Republican. That's something all of us did. But here's what happens to Jackie and I. I mean, after all that, they spent over $20 million against us. Think about that. I mean, they wanted the governor's office more than any other office that was up for election last November. They threw everything they had at it. And after 2.2 million ballots cast, they eked out an 8,700 vote win against a guy that nobody never heard of from the town of Delano, Minnesota. Just a family guy. I mean, we got a lot to be proud of as we look back. And yeah, I could stand up here. I could stand up here in front of you and start complaining about the 451 vouched votes in one precinct at a University of Minnesota campus. I could complain about 3 wards in Minneapolis where the average voter turnout during a non-presidential year up to this point had been 45 to 55%, and somehow, magically, on November 2nd of 2010, it somehow reached 78%. I could do that, but that wouldn't do us any good. I get up the next day, and Jackie has told me that I'm going to write a book someday, and she says, I got the title for you already, Tom. The title is, Really, Lord? I mean, and this is what ties into this whole thing, because you get up and you ask, what was that all about? What are we supposed to do? Well, we just started. This is not about one person. This is about all of us, and this is about taking our state and our country back to the principles that our founders intended. And we have a part to play in that, which is why I'm here to talk to you about the National Committee Man position. This is a very important position for the future of this state and this party. I'll tell you why. Because this guy standing in front of me, this 49-year-old white-haired Republican, does anybody know that if you take out just the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, we won the governor's race in the rest of the state by almost 6 points. Wow. Just those 2 cities, if you take them out, we won the race everywhere across the state by almost 6 points. Another major fact and excitement for all of us, the guy standing in front of you polled higher than any other candidate last November 2nd in the age group 18 to 35. Wow. Think about it. Wow. I said it wasn't about the guy standing in front of you. It's about our message. What does that tell you? That tells you that our message of smaller government, individual freedom, individual liberty and economic freedom is the message that sells to people that are going to be running this state and this country in the next decade. We need to continue to deliver our message to them so they understand this is where they need to be. These are the candidates that they need to be to run the state, to govern the state in this country. So here's what I would look at. After after several weeks, after we sat down and looked at what do you do, how do you participate, where do you take your talents? You guys invested in us, and we've invested in the mission of taking back our state and our country. How do we help? Well, first off, the position of National Committee Man historically has been about representing the Minnesota State Republican Party at the national level. And you have to have strong personalities who can articulate why it is Minnesota must have the resources necessary to be successful. I can do that. I have done that. You have done something for me that I will be forever grateful of, which will only help me do this if you give me the honor of doing the job. I have Chris Christie's phone number in my phone.